So again, as Pam said, I'm with a company called Senior Care Authority. We're elder care strategists, and I've got my colleague here that works with me as well, and his name is Simon Lau. And today we're going to talk about a little bit of a review of the senior living options. We're going to talk about long-term care insurance, when and how you should get that. We're going to talk about some financial options. We're also going to talk about, can I just stay home? What would it take to stay home? So if we think about the big picture, what all of the people and the experts on this panel today, and what all of the people that you gather around you to help you in these decisions, what you want to make sure that they are concerned about is what is best for you, your senior loved one, if you're making decisions for someone else, and the family. This should all be taken as a holistic approach. It's not just about one or two items. This is a big decision when you're making decisions about what your next step should be as you age. And remember, home is where the heart is. Home is not a physical place. It's not a house. It's not an apartment. It's not a room. Home is where the heart is. And we want you to think about that as you think about aging at home, and I just want to stay at home. And we also want to make sure that you're proactive in your decisions. The last thing that any of us on this panel, or any of us that you would surround yourself as experts would want, is for you to be making a decision in a crisis that you don't have control over. So it's really great to find out and figure out what you want to do right now. One of the ways I like to look at it is I like to tell you that it's the where, the when, and the how. So let's figure out where you're going to age, and then let's figure out when and how. And you can be talking to all these experts that are on this call and other experts that we could recommend to you to help you figure out those whens and hows. And there are a couple of people on this call that can really focus on the where for you. So again, we want you to be proactive, and coming to this type of a presentation is the first step in being proactive. So what are the senior living options? Let's talk about the first one and the most simple, independent living. And so these are senior communities that you may have heard of them, 55 plus. They're the 55 and older communities where you're gathering people together, either in a neighborhood or in a building. And in New York City and Westchester, independent living can start at about $5,000 per month. It's maintenance free, you get meals, activities, you get companionship, but you still have privacy in your own apartment. Now, on the con side of it, there's not any medical or nursing care included in this $5,000, and there's not any medical and nursing care that is on site in an independent living. For those of you who live in New York City, an example of this would be Brookdale and Battery Park. Brookdale and Battery Park is an independent living community. For those of you who are in Southwest Florida, there's a plethora of independent communities because that's the first entry point for most of the senior living in the suburban areas and in areas in the South especially. So if you want medication management or caregivers or medical or nursing care in an independent living, you have to bring in your own. You have to manage your own, you have to pay for your own, and these facilities are also not regulated. The next step in this continuum is called assisted living. And if you're in assisted living, you can come in independently because you can come in and pay the rent, which begins at around $5,000, and again in Manhattan can go up to $20,000, $25,000 a month. In Southwest Florida, the high-end numbers are $10,000 a month, but they start lower, so maybe 3 to 10. But you pay separate fees for your care. You have all of the advantages of independent living, but maybe you need some help with your activities of daily living. And the way we like to think of those is think about all the things that it takes for you to live today when you wake up in the morning. Do you need help getting out of bed? Do you need help getting to the toilet? Do you need help taking a shower? Do you need help getting dressed? Do you need help finding your way to the kitchen, or do you need some direction? Do you need some help getting in and out or moving around? Those are activities of daily living, are also termed ADLs. And they can range from one small thing to large things. So you get those assistance. And these are not called nursing homes. So it's not your parents' nursing home or your grandparents' nursing home. These are assisted living. And as I like to say, it's not assisted dying locations. These are assisted living places. It's places to go and live. Now you have to be careful because some of them are limited and they may not have the necessary care for those with dementia, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And they may have certain medical conditions that they won't take or they can't service. And they also can be cost prohibitive. Now, the joke that I've always been told in New York City is that we all live in assisted living because we live in buildings surrounded by people and community. We can have our food brought to us, and the doorman can make sure we don't wander if we have some dementia. However, assisted living is a lot more than just being in a community like New York City. The next step in the continuum of care is what would be termed memory care. And sometimes it's a part of assisted living, and sometimes it's its own community that's all they do. So for example, I'm going to give you a New York example. 305 West End has assisted living and memory care. 80th Street Residence only has memory care. In Florida, you can say that the inspired living communities only have memory care. However, places like the Barrington Terrace communities have both assisted living and memory care. Sometimes if it's a combined setting on a location, that might be good for a couple that one needs memory care and the other doesn't, but they want to live close to each other. These payments and the cost for these specialized programs began at $9,000 and go up. Memory care can be very expensive and can be sometimes double the price of assisted living. Traditionally, in memory care, your price includes all of the care that is needed. It's a one price, all inclusive. So there are advantages, but it is expensive. And sometimes, or I would say most of the time, because someone with memory care is moving to a new location, that person can become very disoriented and can take a step back in their progression can get quicker earlier for making that move. And the last step in the continuum of care is skilled nursing facilities. And these are sometimes called SNFs. They have a medical model just like a hospital. These other three, independent, assisted living, and memory care, they follow a social model. But SNFs are catering to people with high skilled needs, and they include physical therapy, occupational therapy. They are by far the most expensive option. And they also are what used to be thought of as nursing homes. When you're thinking of a nursing home now, if you'd like to use that term, a SNF is what you would be referring to. You would not be referring to an assisted living. The pros in SNFs is that it's 24/7 medical monitoring. However, on the cons, that 24/7 medical monitoring can include overworked staff, and it can be a bit depressing for families as well as for residents because it is less focused on activities and more focused on the medical care. So those items that we've talked about, independent, assisted, memory care, and skilled nursing, are what follow a continuum of care. And there is also a model that takes into account all of those pieces, and that's called a continuing care retirement community. Those are called CCRCs in the industry, and they also have a new term now. They're called life plan communities. These are all inclusive, include services from all of the options we just discussed. However, it can include a sizable entry fee. Most of these, not all, but most of the CCRCs include an entry fee. And these are monitored and regulated by the Insurance Commission. It's an insurance product. And the living costs can be expensive. But some people feel comfortable going into this type of a community because they can see the future in this kind of a community. They know that they'll always have a place, and they know what the cost will be within a certain range for the rest of their life. So with that, now that we've laid the groundwork, I'm going to turn this over to Debbie Dreyleck, who is a geriatric care manager in the New York area. And I'm going to let Debbie give a little introduction about who she is, what she does, and she's going to talk to us about some other options.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hi. So my name is Debbie Drayleck. I am a social worker, and I run a practice which is called New York Elder Care Consultants. We work with older people in the boroughs, although generally not Staten Island and Brooklyn, Westchester County, Manhattan, Bronx, and we help people figure out exactly what they need, what is the right fit for them. And as you're going to hear from all of us, the right fit for one person may not be the right fit for someone else. And there are many components that go into making that decision. There may be family components as to where family members live. There may be that they have friends and they've always lived in a certain neighborhood and want to stay in that neighborhood. Finance, which again, John will speak about, Lynn will speak about. Long-term care insurance, wonderful product, which many people have. I wish more had. So all of these preferences are taken into account when we come up with the care plan. So in my practice, myself and my staff try to help people figure out what is the best plan for them. Now, most people given a choice want to remain in their own home. That's, I personally was the executive director of both an independent living facility and then an assisted living facility. And in the years that I did that, and I would often meet through our marketing staff and through senior move managers and senior living consultants, I would meet prospective residents, and no one ever knocked on the door and said, hey, wow, we're so excited, to be moving. It usually is, unfortunately, results sometimes of a loss. Typical example, I'm thinking of typical kind of clients that we had that moved in where people, let's say, lived in the big empty house and kids left home, then perhaps a spouse may have predeceased them and they were all alone, and very clear, much clearer choices that we would help them figure, out. Now we help them figure out, but generally a lot of people were not sure of what they wanted, but most people want to stay at home. There's a familiarity, there's a comfort in being in your own home. There's independence, that you could decide. I remember one particular resident who was a night owl. And she said to me, I have always lived my life after retirement that at the, I don't go to sleep until about 12 o'clock at night. I enjoy the late night shows. And, I'm not getting up until 10 o'clock, and your breakfast buffet goes from 7 to 9 o'clock. Somebody like that, really just being at home was somewhat better. So let's talk a little bit about the options if one chooses to age in place and stay at home, which many seniors do. Professional caregivers, AKA home health aides, caregivers. These are people who on an ongoing basis can provide personal care and companionship. That could include showering, dressing, meal preparation, housekeeping, escorting them out to doctors, and being a companion. They also serve as the eyes and ears for families, especially my work for the past 36 years has been in New York City and Westchester primarily. And what I have seen is that many of my clients that we work with, and we'll talk a little bit more about people who don't have family members in an upcoming slide, but many people's families live out of town. And it's very hard to, I'm personally, I have a 90-year-old mother, God bless her. She lives 5 blocks away from me. I see her a few times a week. I speak to her every day. It is a lot more difficult. So the caregivers really can become the eyes and ears to really see what's going on. So let me tell you about some of the downsides. The downside is that care can be super expensive. It starts on average at about $25 an hour, or for live-in care at about $250 a day. I've heard, just had a conversation with a brand new client yesterday, visited them, and the son shared with me that he's paying $480 a day for his mother's care. And he did the math, he told me, on that, and he's looking at needing to come up with a plan because in about 14 months, his mother will be out of money at the rate that she's going through money. And so this is not a poor person. However, that will be an issue. Many of our clients, unfortunately, did not have the good fortune to meet Lynn Lavender and purchase long-term care insurance, which would cover care, and Lynn will talk more about that. So that's that as an option, that's a con to it. Medicare, a lot of people do not understand what Medicare covers. The Medicare program is a wonderful program. It covers a lot of medical care, to see doctors, to go into a hospital, to go for subacute rehab, all wonderful. However, ongoing chronic care, it does not cover. Cover a few hours, Mrs. Smith breaks her hip, goes into rehab, goes home for a couple of hours, a couple of days a week, for a few weeks, they'll provide a caregiver. But otherwise, the Medicare program does not provide that kind of ongoing help. And a lot of folks are very disappointed to learn that. And the last issue that sometimes comes up for some of our clients is that they don't want a stranger in their home. They've heard all sorts of things about people, and there are issues of financial misappropriation. We do hear stories of this. I'm involved with an elder abuse committee, and it's extremely, problematic. Most caregivers, thank goodness, that is not the case. They're good, decent, honest people. They work for agencies. They are bonded. But it does become a big issue. I don't want her in my kitchen. I had that with a 97-year-old woman 3 weeks ago. I don't want that woman in my kitchen. It's my kitchen. I don't trust anyone in my kitchen. Okay, but you've lost 25 pounds because you cannot cook for yourself. So it's a big issue. Anyway, next slide. That's home care, and we could answer questions later about home care.
I'm working on it. Hold on, Denise.
Oh, okay, fine. Sorry. I wasn't sure if you were frozen or not. You have like a shining light in your face.
I know. Well,
angelic.
There we are.
There we go. Okay. So I know all of our work has been very much complicated the whole world has been complicated because of COVID-19, but our work, I believe in particular, and many of the decisions that some of the older people or people who are physically frail, even younger disabled people have made, have resulted in social isolation. Social distancing is one thing. Social distancing means I don't get together. I actually just got this morning, from New York City, an update texted to me about how you can't have gatherings of more than 10 people, and restaurants will be closed from 10 o'clock at night until 7 o'clock in the morning now, starting tomorrow night. That's social distancing. However, social distancing can lead to social isolation, and social isolation can cause tremendous emotional and physical harm. We've come across so many people that have so deteriorated physically and mentally as a result of this. COVID-19 brought us to a very different situation, right? Facilities, for example, and I know there's been a real drop in people moving into some of the assisted living facilities. because there were people, especially in the beginning, there was a terrible shortage of the PPE. There was staff that were sick. There were residents that were sick. There's still, I have a client of mine who's 103, and we'll talk more about solo agers in our next slide, but she is someone who has no family at all. And her facility that she lives in, a wonderful assisted living facility, I would say since March, they have had visitation for probably a total of 3 weeks, and being able to eat in a communal dining room. It was her birthday about a month ago, and her attorney and I went to see her. It was during the brief 10-day period that they allowed visits, and we were able to schedule a 45-minute visit in the backyard. 3 days later, I received an email that they are no longer allowing visits again. They had been allowed to have like 3 meals a week in the communal dining room as opposed to bring it to their homes. So I was heartbroken yesterday. Apparently a vendor came in who tested positive. They are shut down again for at least another 2 weeks. So that's something that has been difficult. Families, of course, not being able to visit their loved ones has really led to cognitive and emotional decline. Challenges, on the other hand, however, have brought about new innovations, new perspectives. Safer environments are in place, in most of these facilities. There's new policies that are there regarding visitation. I think that they have become more creative. I think programs like what PSS offered has really made a big difference, both for people in their private homes as well as in facilities. So I, for one, am, actually really grateful to learn more about your program. And I hope it's okay. I'll be referring some people. So that's been the terrible impact. So I'd started speaking about solo aging, and solo aging is a newer term, which takes over a term which I never really liked. I thought it was a little offensive, called elder orphans. And traditionally, elder orphans were thought about as single and childless. And the literature has really expanded to talk about the fact that it also includes childless couples, immigrants in many cases, like people who are living here alone, minorities, the LGBTQ population, basically people who are experiencing greater loneliness than other groups at all ages, because you could have someone who is not able to go out and has no family. They may feel more lonely. They may be younger even and healthier than someone who actively is doing visiting with their families. I have a client in the Bronx, a lovely woman. She's home. She has an iPad. They have twice a week family gatherings on, utilizing her iPad. Sometimes even people with children might be considered solo agers. It could be that their kids are not available due to distance. Maybe there were challenging relationships. Something which we see is, all of us are kind of the sum total of our history and our relationships with people. So there are times that I will have colleagues will say something like, oh my gosh, that family, they're just so awful. They don't visit as much. They don't do as much as they can. And when you really dig in and start to, as we say, peel apart the onion, you discover that, this not good relationship may go back 40 years, 50 years, longer in the cases of siblings. I've seen adult kids, talk about, let's say, their parents as, you don't understand what it was like to grow up as his daughter. He was an alcoholic, or he just was not available emotionally for us. And now he's 90 And we need to step in and possibly take care of his finances, all of his arrangements, oversee all of his care. It's a lot. So there's always history. The one thing that I believe that most solo agers fear is, who is going to take care of me if I cannot take care of myself? And when the decision is made as to what type of care, I believe that that is a really strong factor that has to come into play. And certain decisions, for example, like perhaps someone who's a solo ager might do better in a setting like an assisted living facility that Cynthia finds them, where there will be oversight, there will be staffing, they won't be subject to, oh my gosh, there's a terrible, 15 feet of snow is coming to New York City and they're shutting down the subway system. Or, oh my God, there's a pandemic. Who would ever thought of that, right? In the past, there's a pandemic coming. I don't want some of these folks coming into my house while they're taking public transportation, bringing in germs. So the concept of being alone can also drive the decision making. One of the things that we suggest with these solo agers in particular sometimes is to identify sort of the non-traditional caregivers in the person's life. There may be a nephew, there may be a neighbor, there may be a friend who's willing to step in. And I've seen some people do amazing things that you would never picture someone to take on. I do believe really strongly, and my colleagues on the panel have heard me speak about this, I'm a big believer in a team. Get yourself a team. The cases will be the best outcomes will come when there are multiple people involved. Hire a care manager, someone who knows the system. An attorney, make sure that you have your advance directives in order, healthcare proxies, power of attorneys, and maybe even voluntary guardianships. I had a client about 5 years back who actually was all alone, had no family, knew that her cognition was starting to decline. And she said, what can I do? And we discussed voluntary guardianship. So she was able to meet with the guardian before. She felt comfortable with that person. They knew exactly what she wanted. That person knew, okay, that woman would rather stay at home. And they were able to give her what she wanted. Daily money managers, a really important factor so that a person's bills could get paid and to secure their finances. Thank you. Okay, at home care support and advocacy. Again, input of outside professionals to come in, to be able to see what's going on, that have no baggage. This is not the mother that they've fought with from the time they were 12 years old that's coming in. It's someone who is completely objective, very important. Assisted living facilities, in many ways, as I said, with the solo agers, it's a simpler option in terms of it's secure. If there's a snowstorm, you could be sure you're going to always be fed, as opposed to if there's a bad snowstorm and the family won't be able to get to you or the caregivers can't get to you. It could be a better choice in that it offers a very comprehensive lifestyle. And again, even in assisted living facilities, you could really, or skilled nursing, you could benefit from having that support network that I was talking about, before, of people to advocate for you. Kind of like, they talk about now having your person. So to have your person or your people, your team is going to, I believe, ensure a much better positive outcome.
So now we'll go over to some different ways to pay for these discussions that Debbie and I have had and different options, because I think, as you have seen, they're not inexpensive, and that care needs to be paid for in some way. Most of the time it's private pay. As we mentioned earlier, we're not going to talk about the Medicaid option on this call. It's a whole separate call, but we're talking about private pay, which can be expensive. So let's move on to Lynn. Lynn, you're on mute.
Okay, there we go.
There you go.
Thank you, Cynthia. As Cynthia indicated, I'm going to be addressing the insurance portion of this presentation. I have been in this business over 20 years. I'm an insurance professional. I'm a financial advisor who no longer handles investments. I only concentrate on insurance. And over the course of my 20 years, I started specializing in long-term care insurance because I found other advisors were giving it short shrift. So over these 20 years, I work with individuals. I've represented and introduced long-term care at large corporations, and for the federal government, for a major union. So I've seen all kinds of long-term care insurance, from individual kinds of policies to large group policies that don't exist anymore. Now, while some people choose to self-insure, meaning they choose to pay for care from their own pockets, they don't often realize just how expensive a chronic illness can be. Now, both Cynthia and Debbie did talk about this, and they talked about the costs. And Debbie mentioned the cost starting at maybe $250 a day and going up from there. That includes not only room and board, but all of the other ancillary services that Debbie mentioned for the team. That's not necessarily the cost that you see in these cost of care surveys. Now that translates to over $90,000 a year. And while many people only need care for an average of 3 years or so, people with dementia or progressive illnesses like Parkinson's can be debilitated for a really very long time. Now, people who are comfortable and used to traveling first class, they don't choose average services when they're sick, so their costs could be even higher. And while they may be able to afford to pay for care, they should be thinking about which monies they would use and what those funds had been allocated for. A chronic condition can easily derail the best of estate plans. So over the next couple of slides, I will explain the different kinds of coverage and compare the features and the costs. And I'll also briefly touch on how corporations can include long-term care insurance as part of an executive benefit package. So primarily, there are two insurance options that pay for chronic or long-term care. 3, if you count life insurance with living benefits. Now, you can think of long-term care insurance as providing a benefit beyond your discretionary income, so you don't have to invade assets to pay for care, and thus allow your estate plan to execute as intended. Now, traditional long-term care, next slide, Cynthia, it's pure insurance. It meaning that there is no benefit other than long-term care. It has no cash value. It has no death benefit. It's kind of like homeowners insurance. If your house never burns down, you won't get any insurance when you sell your home. These are reimbursement policies. That means they pay for benefits for services that are specified in a plan of care developed by a care manager like Debbie. So for care at home, bills for qualified services are submitted to the carrier or the insurance company monthly, and the insurance company reimburses the policy owner. Now, with traditional long-term care, you can choose a benefit anywhere between $3,000 a month to $15,000 a month, depending upon the insurance company. Now, most long-term care policies have something called most traditional long-term care insurance has something called a benefit period, which can be very confusing because it leaves people with the impression that coverage will only last for the duration of that period. Actually, the benefit period is only a multiplier that determines the initial lifetime maximum. Now, I specify initial because the policy will increase in value if an inflation rider is included, which is almost always. So, for example, if your monthly cap or your monthly benefit is $6,000 a month, and your benefit period is stated as 3 years, you can calculate your initial lifetime benefit by multiplying 6,000 by 12 months in a year, which is $72,000 for 1 year, times 3 for 3 years, and that equals 218,000. Now, if you had chosen a $3,000 a month benefit for 6 years, you would have the exact same lifetime maximum. $3,000 a month times 12 months is $36,000 a year times 6 years, again, equals 218,000. Now, if you choose or had chosen the $6,000 a month benefit and only spent $3,000 a month, your policy will last for 6 years because any benefit you're entitled to but don't use remains available for future use. So you're always better off with a larger monthly benefit than with a longer benefit period because you have more control over the use of the policy and how home care benefits are actually scheduled. So to put it succinctly, a short, fat policy is better than a long, skinny one. The next piece of the constructing a policy is figuring out how you want this policy to keep up with inflation. And the inflation options can vary from company to company. These are options that allow the benefits to keep up with increasing costs over time. They may be simple inflation, compound, or they could be tied to an index like the CPI. Now, the most common these days is 3% compound. It used to be 5%, but most people can't even afford that option anymore. Other options that might be included in traditional long-term care could be sharing benefits with a spouse. There are different waiting periods, which are analogous to deductibles. Now, these waiting periods, also called elimination periods, are expressed in days, 30 and 90 being the most common. Some policies count the waiting period by calendar days, and some only count the days when a qualified service is performed. Some policies offer a limited cash benefit in lieu of reimbursing for submitted bills. So you really need to know these differences because especially with a waiting period, the difference between a calendar day and a service day is huge. You could be paying out of pocket for 6 months if you have a service contract and you're only receiving services every other day. So even though you have a 90-day waiting period, if they're only counting days that you've received services, it could be a lot more out of pocket. Now, all the policies that I see today among the traditional options are tax qualified, which means that the benefits aren't taxable and the premiums may qualify for a tax deduction depending upon your medical expenses in relation to your adjusted gross income. Now, the amount of the deduction is also indexed by age. So if you have huge medical bills in relation to your income, you might get a federal tax deduction, but I wouldn't count on it. In New York, all tax qualified plans, regardless of income or medical expenses, also qualify for a 20% tax credit, not a deduction, a credit against the annual premium. So for each $1,000 that you may pay annually, you can think of getting a discount of maybe $200 because that will be a $200 credit will be applied toward whatever your New York State income tax might be. Now, the next type of coverage we have seen grow up in the last, 10 years or so are hybrid plans. And hybrid plans are a cross between life insurance and long-term care insurance. And they were developed for 2 reasons. It overcame a common objection, which people often voiced. What if I never need care? Won't I just be throwing away my money? Although they never say this about homeowners insurance or other kinds of insurance. Also, people with healthy money market accounts or considerable sums in CDs often say, I can pay for care from these accounts rather than draw on a retirement asset or stock portfolio. I'm okay. I have plenty of money. Well, number one, they may have underestimated the actual cost. But with these hybrid plans, a tax-free life insurance benefit is paid to a named beneficiary if the long-term care benefit is not accessed or not fully depleted. If you do not get the long-term care benefit and the death benefit, and the death benefit will be reduced dollar for dollar for the amount spent on long-term care services. Now, this appeals to a lot of people because it answers that question. What if I never use it? Will I have thrown out all my money? Well, somebody will get the benefit, although it may not be you. It might be your children or a spouse, whatever. Now, these plans are also limited pay plans, meaning they can be paid in one lump sum or over 10 or 20 years, depending upon the insurance company. The premiums are guaranteed to never increase, unlike traditional long-term care, where the insurance company can appeal to the State Department of Insurance and request an increase on certain groups of policies if they can prove actuarially necessary. But the hybrid plans have guaranteed premiums. Now, by transferring a lump sum of money from a money market or a CD, you can leverage that benefit from 2 to 6 times. So if you had $100,000 in a money market, you could transfer it to one of these policies, and depending upon your age, it might yield anywhere from $200,000 to $600,000 worth of long-term care benefit. Now, if you have a life insurance policy currently with cash value, you can also transfer that cash to a hybrid policy with no tax issues, as long as the cash goes directly from one insurance company to the other via a feature of the IRS code called a 1035 exchange. The last insurance option we have is life with living benefits. Now, the living benefits is a rider, and a lot of the newer policies give people the option to include this with their life insurance. With some companies, it will add another 10 to 15% on top of the cost of the regular life insurance. Now, these are really not considered long-term care insurance. The benefits are actually an advance of the death benefit. Now, a typical advance might be 2% of the death benefit per month. And each year, the IRS issues the limit of what can be advanced under these policies. This year, it is $11,400 per month. Next year, maybe a little higher, but that keeps going up. Now, these premiums are not tax advantaged. There is no tax credit in New York, and there is no federal deduction for these premiums. Some of these plans follow the same criteria for qualifying for benefits as traditional long-term care. Others use a definition of requiring chronic care. In some states, that might mean being confined to a nursing home. In other states, you may be considered permanently requiring care. In either case, how do I shut this off? In either case, where were we? I'm sorry. In either case, the benefits aren't subject to taxation. So let's proceed with comparing these features. And because they're so different, I put this out in chart form, trying to simplify by highlighting the advantages of each type of insurance. So here we have 3 columns for each of the 3 options. And as you can see, what I did was I highlighted in blue the kinds of coverage that are most beneficial. In the first column with traditional long-term care, for each dollar of premium that you pay, you will get the most long-term care coverage. For each dollar of premium you pay with the life with living benefits, you'll get the most life insurance. And the hybrid policies fall somewhere in between. Now, traditional long-term care, as I said earlier, is based on a reimbursement model, meaning you pay the bills and then you submit it to the insurance company and they reimburse you. With life insurance, most of the policies, when you qualify for benefits, just pay you in cash. And that cash can be used for anything you want. They can be used for qualified expenses, or they can be used for getting your hair done. It's your money. You can do whatever you want with it. The same thing goes or may go for the hybrid plans. You may, depending upon the company, you will either have a cash or reimbursement plan. Now, with the cash plan, it won't stretch out the length of time you can get benefits, but you will get all the money. So let's say your benefit is $10,000 a month and your expenses are only $5,000. You'll get the $10,000 a month under a cash indemnity plan, but you'll have to have the discipline to put that $5,000 away for future use for care, because it's not going to remain in your policy. But then again, you have the flexibility to do whatever you want with it. Again, the only kind of policy that is has that 20% tax credit advantage is traditional long-term care. So the bottom line here is traditional long-term care. Oh, Cynthia, could you go back one?
Sure.
So when we look here at the bottom line, traditional long-term care, again, to recap, will only pay benefits if you need the care. With the hybrid plans and the life with living benefit, either a life insurance benefit will be paid or a long-term care benefit will be paid. So that satisfies the objection of, what if I never need it? Now let's compare the costs. And if we look at the bottom line here, you can see over a period of 30 years, I base this on a current age of a male of 55 who's married, because married people do get a discount. He's applying by himself and he has standard health. In other words, if he had preferred health, his health record was perfectly perfect, he might get a preferred rate, so it might be a little less expensive. And we're assuming that his policy starts at age 55 and he goes on claim in 30 years at age 85. Well, you can see over a course of those 30 years, his cumulative premium under traditional long-term care for a similar benefit in monthly benefit would be about $57,000. And that's assuming that he never gets an increase in rate, but he probably will. The hybrid plan, we're looking at a premium of approximately $120,000, which may be paid over 10 years or 20 years, depending upon the company, or in one lump sum. Or the life with living benefits based on a guaranteed universal life policy might cost $62,000. Now, because there is no inflation rider on these life insurance policies, this benefit is not going to go up. It's going to be $5,000 today, and it's going to be $5,000 when he's 85. With traditional long-term care, the benefit starts out at $5,000 today, but because we have a 3% inflation rider on that policy, at age 85, his benefit will have grown to $12,136. So you can see the advantage of having that 3% inflation in there. And you can see that the premium is $57,000, but again, there is no benefit if he never accesses the long-term care feature. The hybrid plans are a little tricky because even with an inflation rider on there, the policies in New York State currently do not inflate the first 2 years on claim. So in 30 years, the benefit is going to be the same as it was in the beginning, 5482. The inflation rider and these policies kicks in year, there's a mis typo here, in year 3. In year 3, 4, 5, and 6, his policy starts at over 22,000 and will continue to grow. So in essence, that $5,400 over 2 years will equal this 120,000 approximately. So although this really looks great, he has available benefit of $1,418 a month at age 85. In reality, you still have to calculate what's coming out of pocket the first 2 years. Now, the next slide is the exact same plan, but in this case, this man waited until he was 64 to apply for the same plan. You can see that the cost is about $54,000 because he's that much older. It's almost equal to what the man who was 55 paid. Not much difference. But if you look at what this man put in, he's going to have that much less benefit because there isn't that 30 years to grow from the 5,000 up to $10,000, $11,000 when he's age 85. And you can see here that the total amount of benefit is considerably less because he's had 10 less years of growth in that policy. So in actuality, in order to have the same benefit 85 as the 55-year-old, the 64-year-old would have had to purchase $62,000 more in coverage than the 55-year-old to make up the difference for the guaranteed inflated cost. So to get the same benefit at 85, the 64-year-old would have had to buy a benefit of $287 a month instead of $160. Now, the older you get, the less the chance that you're either going to get a guaranteed rate or you're going to get, a preferred rate, or you're going to get coverage at all. If you are over 70 and in poor health, or you're in poor health and you're younger and can't get long-term care insurance, there is one additional insurance option, and that's called a life settlement. A life settlement is the sale of an insurance policy for more than the cash value, if there is any, and less than the death benefit. I don't have a slide on this, right, Cynthia?
No, you don't.
Sorry about that. This might be appropriate for people who no longer want or can afford their life insurance. And rather than cancel a policy and take the cash value, if there is any, they can sell it to a third party for fair market value. A broker will put the policy out to various institutional buyers for bids, and the buyer, as the new owner, will change the beneficiary of the policy and continue the premium payments and will ultimately collect the death benefit. Where I see this fit in is for people who need for life insurance no longer exists. Either they don't have a beneficiary anymore, or the beneficiaries either don't need the benefit or they may not be able to help pay the premiums. So if people are strapped for cash and they have permanent insurance, this might be another option for them. Now, a policy doesn't have to have cash value in order to be sold. The most common types of policy to be sold are actually universal life, survivorship universal life, or even term insurance that has no value at all, cash value, that is convertible. Lastly, I'd just like to mention this for some of the people in the audience here. For those of you who are decision makers at corporations, you may want to consider bonusing key employees with insurance. You know, many companies pay bonuses to employees at holiday time, and when January rolls around, they may be gone. So this is kind of a form of, quote, the golden handcuffs. By paying for an employee's long-term care insurance, and specifically hybrid plans, over a specified period of 5 or 10 years, the employee might be less likely to leave, knowing that if she or he would have to pay the remaining premiums out of pocket if they left. The hybrid plans are well suited for this, since a death benefit or long-term care benefit will ultimately be paid. So that's pretty much it on the insurance side. If you'd like more information, I guess you can contact me or put your questions in the chat, and we'll defer them till later. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn. Now we're going to move over to John to talk about some other payment options, and I'll let John introduce himself as well before we move into his slides.
Here. Good morning, everybody. My name is John Evans. I'm an independent financial advisor, a registered investment advisor, and I have the certified financial planner, certified employee benefits specialist qualification. I've also got a degree with honours and a master's from London. I was born on a farm in Wales, a little bit different. All my family are farmers. My daughter's training to be a vet, but I have worked in financial services for about 35 years, and 30 of those have been in New York. Very much established and very happy here. I've been a financial advisor for just over 15 years of that time. I own my own firm, Hudson Capital Management, and my focus is servicing families with their investment management and insurance and annuities needs. I also service small companies with their benefits. Incidentally, I do a lot of financial planning for clients and prospects, and I offer quite a lot of that free. The goal with any financial planning, never forget it, it's to help you to make an informed decision that meets your needs best. So that's a little bit about my background. So my focus, as I say, is choosing the best solution. The bottom line is there's no solution that fits all. So you covered already today the key living options to consider and the different types of insurance that can apply. Now we're moving to this issue of, well, how do we choose the option that fits your needs best? It's elaborate, and it's certainly a case that one solution doesn't fit all. It's a big issue. You need to make the best decision possible for you and your family, and it's really a case of peeling the onion slowly on a number of different fronts. First of all, most important, I would say, you need to understand your overall financial position. In detail, your assets, liabilities, your insurance policies, your income expenses, get a very solid picture of those. And also your financial priorities. Who do you feel responsible for? What do you plan to do as your legacy? Can you self-insure? What other financial goals may be compromised if you do self-insure? I doubt that hardly any of you have those issues fully covered, but it's very important to really scrutinize those issues. If your retirement expenses start to exhaust your assets, which of your financial goals are you going to have to give up or dilute? That's the way to think about this kind of a decision. So moving on to this next slide, you need to understand the cost and benefits of each option. We've talked about continued care, retirement, communities, assisted living, these different types of insurance. It's important to target the facilities you're most interested in and drill down to their respective costs and benefits. Pricing for these changes, so there's a need to work closely with the facilities to get a full and complete breakdown of the current costs. Next slide, please. So the goal really is to model these figures over several years to understand their potential impact on your retirement assets. The idea is to model various what ifs. What if this happens? What if I take that option? And get to understand the probable impact of different costs and also of these different scenarios. Let me explain this graph. This modeling will be based on detailed financial information from you and the options you are considering. So you've got three, in this scenario, we have three alternative scenarios here. All three start with the assumption that you've got $1 million in retirement assets. By the way, I do this analysis for people with half of that and less. I've just picked a figure here. The costs will be the long-term care costs plus all of your other living costs. So in the line depicted by the orange line, in that scenario, you start off with $1 million. You have exhausted your assets by year 23. That's along the horizontal line. So if you started at age 70, that would be age 93. In the red scenario, by year 30, that's age 100, you'd have about 250,000 left. In the black scenario, by year 30, age 100, you've grown your assets slightly. Now, the key thing about this modeling is that I changed the various factors there so we can understand what the impact of changes can be. We cost out different options, different choices. We look at, for example, what interest rate should we model on your retirement assets as you get closer to retirement. By the way, you should be more defensive with your investments when you're in retirement for two basic reasons. Number one, if you're aggressive and riskier, you are going to incur losses. It will be harder to recoup those losses because you won't be earning over this time, so you won't have time to recover those assets. You should also set up more income generating investments that will fund some of your retirement costs. What I mean there is you should put more of your money into fixed investments that generate a solid level of income that can feed your portfolio with money that you need to cover these costs. We can also model what change in living costs in retirement. It's very likely that the costs that you have before retirement, your living costs are going to be significantly different. We can also model, well, when do you start? Do I start now? Do I start 5 years from now? How much do I need to save in this 5-year period? All kinds of different things can be modeled very easily. And the benefit in doing it is that you get a sense of what the impact of those changes have on your overall financial situation. The thing to note is if your retirement is at risk financially, then it might well be worth doing legal planning to enable you to take full advantage of medical services provided in New York. That's not a topic for this meeting. But the key thing here with the planning and all of this, this major issue is be proactive. Start as soon as possible, because if you're not proactive and you end up being reactive, quite often the choices are limited. You're under a lot more pressure. When you're proactive and we start doing this modeling, it's actually fun. You get the sense of, well, what does that mean? What is the impact of this? And the bottom line is it will help you to make an informed decision and feel comfortable in the way that you've tackled it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things we want to open this up for questions now, and I want to point out a couple of things. I think that what we have here is we have a panel of people who can answer questions about a number of things. And I know with my clients, I rely on people like Debbie and John. My company will do a financial spin down model, but we tell our clients to take it to their financial advisor to make sure that they're having that discussion. We also send maybe not our actual client who's moving into assisted living, but we always send the children. We want them, the adult children, to make sure they're talking to long-term care policy and insurance salespeople, because of the fact that they come to us and their eyes are really wide open with the fact that they didn't realize how much it was going to cost. So part of our goal here was just to make sure that you understand all of the different pieces. And we have 45 people on this call, and that there are 45 different ways to solve these problems. There's at least from those 45 people. So it's difficult to do a presentation where we can say, everyone needs to do this, and everyone needs to have this much money, and everyone needs to go in this direction. What we're trying to do is bring to you all of the thought processes and the options, and we're trying to confuse you a little bit so that you can then find people who can help you with this. And as you've heard from a lot of us here, there's initial discussions that we can get you set up that don't cost you anything. We embrace having that initial conversation to find out what your story is, because every one of the people on this in this discussion are are individuals with different situations. So I'm going to open this up for questions, and let me see if I can find the questions up here. And see, let's see if there's any questions. Shayna, can you unmute everyone so that they can ask questions if they have them? I don't see any questions other than some technical issues, and we will be sending out these the recording and the slides in the next couple of days. But I'd love to we'd love to open it up, Shayna, and just unmute everyone if we have some questions.
Did it? Where if you want to say something, you can just unmute yourself and you'll be able to speak.
So feel free to either put it in the chat or to open it up, or to unmute yourself and ask the question. I can't ever decide if I'm excited that there are no questions because we've done an absolutely 100% perfect job, or if I'm disappointed and think that people are asleep. So raise your hand and let us know, are you asleep, or did we really answer every single one of your questions? Speak.
And can somebody discuss the CCRC upfront costs and fees, and how are they reimbursed if you decide to leave the CCRC?
John, do you want me to talk about that? I can't hear you. You're on mute. John, you're on mute.
Yeah, sure. Cynthia, have a shot if you like. I will mention one specific example because they vary. Every one of these vary.
Okay, so let me tell you what I know about them, and then John may have an example. So on CCRCs, there's a variety of options to pay in. There are options anywhere from you get 0 return to you get 90% return, and anywhere between. And they have waiting periods for that return. When you submit your money, I'm going to use $1 million as an example. You pay $1 million. That money is like an annuity, but it begins to amortize. Most of them give you 4 years for it to amortize. And if you've been there 4 years, at that point, you go into the plan that is that 0% to 90% refund. However, once you've gone across that line, if you die or if you leave, whatever reason that you leave that community, you get back whatever plan you bought into. If you bought into a 0 plan and you stay for 4 years and you leave, you don't like it, you're not happy, or you die, none of your money returns to you. If you stay for the 4-year piece of it and you, and 4 years is just an example I'm giving because they all have different amortization schedules. You stay for 4 years and you leave in the 5th year for whatever reason, you don't like it, you don't want to do it anymore, you die, and you signed up for the 90% plan, you get 90% back, or your heirs get 90% back. Does that answer that part of it? John, you want to go ahead with
yeah, I can, thanks. I think that's very generically how they work, and there are very subtle variations on each of them. I've talked to a couple in Westchester, which is where I'm based, and they typically have they've got a medical component and a residential component. All the contracts they have that, but the way they differ is the entry fee charges, and some of them offer refunds on those entry fees, and some of them offer a discount if you do have long-term care insurance as part of the modified life care contract. So the thing that's common to them is that you pay a pretty hefty fee, an entrance fee. You probably pay a pretty hefty life fee one time, and then you're paying a monthly fee to live there.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go through some of the questions we have here a minute. So Angela asked if there were senior advisors in every state. So I am what's called a certified senior advisor, a CSA, and there are a number of people who have that certification after their name that could do what I do what John does, do what Debbie does. Several people in those areas have a CSA, and there are senior advisors in every state. What I do in every state. My focus is New York City and Southwest Florida, but I place people and work with people all over the country. So that is an answer to that question. Lynn, we have a question here on long-term care. Is there a preferred age to purchase a long-term care policy?
Yes, and this is, I don't mean to be snarky, but the answer is as soon as you can afford it, because you never know what's going to happen with age or with these policies. They get more expensive as time goes on. If the people on this call look at the slides when they get them, if you then compare the slides, the two cost slides between a 55 and a 64-year-old, you'll actually see what 10 years of waiting actually does. Not only will it cost more, or you have to buy more to make up for the lack of growth, if your health changes in any way, you may not be able to get it anymore. Insurance is the only thing you can't buy with money. You buy it with your good health. So as I see people over 65, there is a less and less of a chance that you're going to get a preferred rate. And there's less and less of a chance that you might get an offer at all.
And Lynn, to follow up with that, if you purchase a plan while you live in New York, but then you move to California, does that plan transfer with you on that move?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, California is pretty strict, as is New York. New York is probably the most consumer-friendly state. And once you buy a contract, it is a New York contract, so that the laws of New York are there to protect you. So it doesn't matter whether you go to Arkansas or Alaska, you will have, if there are any issues with that policy, you have the New York Department of Insurance behind you.
And say to answer your question around, is it okay if your client and her adult child contact one of us? That would be great. I've got our information is here on the screen, and then we'll also be sending out our information afterwards, but feel free to take down the information and contact any of us. If you contact me and that information is really more in John's wheelhouse, I'm going to refer you over to John and get you connected with John. So that's how we all work as a team together. I'm not going to try to answer John's questions, and Lynn's not going to try to answer my questions or Debbie's questions. We're going to make sure that we get you to the right person. So
Cynthia,
you don't have to,
we need a correction on Debbie's contact information.
okay. Oh, you know what we do? We've got Debbie's, Lynn's email address there. I'll get that back to you. Thank you, Pam.
Cynthia?
I'm going to go up to the front and get this up at the front of the presentation.
Cynthia?
Yes.
I'd just like to call attention to one of the comments. We have on this Zoom call one of nationally recognized long-term care expert, and that is Phyllis Shelton. And Phyllis just commented that long-term care insurance is a bargaining chip on the CCRC entrance fee for many of these living arrangements.
That's good to know. Thank you. And I'm going to correct Debbie's while we're talking. The next question I have on here is, can Debbie explain how a policy might be triggered from her side? I think that's going to be Debbie and Lynn both. Did we lose Debbie? Is Debbie still here? Debbie and Lynn, can you explain? And Debbie, you're on mute.
Won't allow me. Now it allowed me to unmute myself.
There you go.
Yeah, so I know sometimes care managers help people. What's important to know, and I think sometimes, I again just had a conversation this week with a potential client who, one of the first questions I always ask is, do you have long-term care insurance? Because it's such a wonderful tool, and as I said, I wish more people planned ahead and purchased it. So this one person told me, yes, I have long-term care insurance. I'm like, awesome. I mean, my mother has it. I'm like, awesome. Tell me more about your mother. And well, you know, she's still pretty feisty. She's still getting around by herself. But I think I would feel better if she had someone with her. And I had to kind of burst this person's bubble. And I told them that realistically, you know, you do, in order to use your long-term care insurance policy to trigger it, you have to either have, and Lynn, feel free, you'll correct me if anything has changed, but you need to either have a more advanced dementia diagnosis or need assistance with 2 activities of daily living. So that can include showering and dressing, transferring from a chair, and being, you know, and needing to be fed. But without that, just because this woman, you know, felt a little bit better about mom having a caregiver, unfortunately, I don't believe, you know, when I shared this with her, I said, I don't think your mom is at the point yet that you could trigger the policy. And, you know, Lynn, maybe tell me if anything has changed with that, or if
No,
anything is different.
the activities of daily living, you have it exactly right, Debbie. It's if you need human assistance with 2 out of the 6 activities of daily living, or if you have a cognitive impairment that might make you a danger to yourself or others. And just to back up what you said, even though people may be very ill, they may have cancer, they may have other conditions. This is a functional definition, not because you have cancer and may be terminal. If you can't perform the activities, that's what triggers the payment. And I have found that the insurance companies do not stand in the way of you getting a claim. I have found dealing with reputable insurance companies, they always, they're never there to not pay. They send out people who actually help people get on claim.
Right, that's part of the process. By the way, it's a couple of steps that, you know, when you wish to initiate your policy, the first thing is to call, and they'll schedule a time for a phone evaluation with a nurse. And then that's followed up with a nurse coming into your home, you know, to really see, you know, and get a sense of what your needs really are. So those are the steps.
You know, and Debbie, one of the things that I always mention to my clients, we want our clients to be as honest and truthful during those examinations by the long-term care companies. However, one of the stories that I have is a client who was in a wheelchair. She couldn't get up the stairs. She had one of those chair lifts that took her up the stairs. She had incontinence. She could not get in a shower. And when they came to do the interview with her, her daughter was not there at the time, and she miraculously, like Lazarus, stood up and ran around the dining room table and said, I'm in great shape. I don't need what my long-term care policy triggered. And part of it was she didn't want to move from the home into assisted living. And so she stood up, and they didn't pass her. They had to come back and do another qualification interview about 2 or 3 months later. So we didn't ever see her run around that dining room table again, but we just want to make sure people are very honest with these interviews to make sure that they get what they have paid for.
True.
Cynthia, I believe Wyatt had a question.
Sure. Hold on. Let me maybe go back to long-term care one more minute here. Do long-term care policies work abroad, Lynn?
Oh, that's tricky. Most of the policies do not. There is one company that will allow claims abroad. It's a hybrid policy. If there is a doctor in that country that's American certified who can certify to the need. It's not easy. Some of the companies will pay a limited benefit abroad, but you have to come back to receive most of it. So it's really on an individual basis, and it varies from company to company, but it's not easy.
Okay. So Pam, I'm sorry, who else had a question?
Wyatt. If Wyatt would unmute, he had a question earlier.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Hi, my question has already been answered. My question was about what triggers long-term care policies, and I think that's been answered very adequately. Thank you, Pam.
Uh-huh. Let's see.
I
I
have,
know, go ahead.
I had a question for John. With interest rates so low, what fixed income vehicles would he suggest for seniors since CD rates are so low now? And what does he think of annuities and other fixed income vehicles? Because that's what he was suggesting.
Thank you. Well, you're absolutely right. Interest rates are so low. It's a tremendous challenge to get something that's bearing anything like reasonable interest. There are investments out there that are paying somewhere around 4 to 5% that are investment grade. They're not easy to get. By that I mean you're not going to see them in the bank, but they are high quality investment grade. Annuities are tricky, and by that I mean you've just got to be very, very careful and know exactly what the rules are about the annuities. I actually am a big fan of annuities. If when people buy them, they're fully aware of how they work. Sadly, a lot of the time that doesn't happen. I think they're very applicable in this environment with low interest. And it's really a question of, you've got fixed rate annuities, variable rate annuities that pay a living benefit. There are a lot of guarantees involved with annuities. And they change, by the way, even in the last 6 months, they've changed. So if you would like to, please reach out to me, and I'm very, very happy to drill down into more detail with that and give you an idea of what I think is out there. It varies day by day, but I do think CD rates, I mean, they're just horrible, and you can do a lot better than that. The question, truthfully, that is where that fits in, how much of your assets you should have is fixed, and that's something to take into account as well. So please reach out.
We need to conclude because we are at the end of our time. And I want to once again thank everyone who came on this call. It thrills my heart to know that people are being proactive in these types of decisions, because as you saw in this discussion, there are a lot of decisions to be made. And we've spoken about this before when I've done presentations before with PSS. There are so many people that you need to be talking to really make sure you're getting and going in the right direction as you make these decisions. Again, we'll send this information out. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your great questions. I appreciate your putting up with me on the as the slide mover. And again, we'll send the slides and the presentation to you all through email, and it'll take us a couple of days to get the presentation where it needs to be able to send it out. And we'll get that to you. And again, call any of us. We'd love to help you. All of us do this as a way of making a living, but we all do it with our heart. Most of us had other jobs that maybe we made a little bit of a better living, but we've come into this because we want to help people. So feel free to give any of us a call about anything, and we'll make sure you get to the right person. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk to you the next time.
And thank you so much, Cynthia. You've put together a great team. I think we've all been so well educated, and there's still many, many questions that we have, but we know who to go to. And I thank you for that. You can also find this recorded on the YouTube channel. We will let you know how to get that recording. So you'll have two different options. One, it will be delivered to you, and the other one, you can go to the PSS YouTube channel. Thank you, John, Lynn. Thank you, Cynthia and Debbie. It's been a wonderful morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.